All right, so we're gonna just get her parted off right behind her ears. We're gonna use the From Pro clips. Okay. Hello. So our client has naturally curly hair. We did go ahead and blow her hair out and press her. I typically like to go in with the hair straightened because I feel like that gives me the most precise cut. I usually don't cut when it's wet all the time. Depending on the curl texture, sometimes I will. But for the most part, I like to go in when the hair is nice and smooth. I can get a really precise cut that works well on curly or hair that is straight or hair that is going to be blown out straight. So that's kind of what I went ahead and did today. We went ahead and just blew her out, pressed her, and I'm going to show you guys how to get her ends nice and clean. So we're going to just part her off a little bit, right behind the ears. Hello. So I'm gonna have my model tilt her head down just a little bit, okay? And get control of that. All right, and you guys can see here, we can definitely even her off a little bit in the back. She has had her hair previously cut, but I'm gonna try to even and balance her haircut off as much as possible. Normally when I'm doing the perimeter is 0 degree elevation, and I have them tilt their head down just a little bit, so that way anything that pops out underneath at her nape doesn't surpass the length that I've cut, okay? So let me just show you guys. We're just gonna go across. We're gonna do a natural fall, okay? Can you guys see this? Let's tilt that over just a little bit. All right, we're just gonna do a natural fall. We're gonna cut straight across. Now the invent shears are really good for cutting hair that's dry and cutting hair that is wet. They're very universal. Okay. Right. So now we have her ends nice and clean. Can you guys hear me? Can I have a thumbs up? Thumbs up. Okay, all right. So let's get going. So we're gonna pull this next section down and see if we see our guide. Okay, so we have some spots where we can't see, so we're just gonna part out a little more. Yes, you can hear me. Okay, perfect. All right, and we are going to just continue to keep her head tilted down. And you guys can see her guide right in here, okay? So we're gonna just go right across. Sometimes I start off in the center so I can make sure each side is balanced, okay? So if you go in and snip through the center, then this kind of gives you your guide here, and then you can go ahead and take this part off. Sometimes if you start on one side and go across, you kind of get like a slope. And I think that's just natural with how most people cut. But if you look in here, you can see these little pieces sticking up. That's gonna be your guide, okay? And these invent shears cut very smooth, all right? Okay. Oh wow, that looks really good. All right. And guys, please ask questions. I'll pause a few times and answer any questions that you guys have. So we're gonna pull this down. This is the last portion of the back that we're going to trim into the perimeter. Okay, and you can clearly see your guys. So just gonna snip, snip. And this is a cut at a natural fall. Natural meaning I'm not holding with my 2 fingers and pulling it down. I'm just letting her hair naturally fall and brush her back, and then I'm just gonna trim straight across. Most hair, well, our hair naturally falls, so sometimes it's better to trim that way than it is to hold it, okay? All right. So normally when I get to the sides, I'll have them tilt their head back up just slightly. Okay. And I will take this piece here and just follow it around. So we all know that our hair grows on our head pretty even, but because it's a round shape, it's gonna naturally fall round. So we're gonna just keep trimming. Another rule of thumb I like is that even though the hair, it needs a trim, you can still kind of see wear on the head. So just imagine like a circle, okay, like a U. Let's imagine a U, because that's how our hair is going to naturally fall when it's from our head, right? So if I say, well, we're going to take 2 inches off today, because you really need to take 2 inches off, okay? So let the 2 inches also be your guide. So not only are you going to cut your guide from the back and come around, you're going to let those 2 inches be your guide. So if you can see that it's fairly evenly uneven, then you're going to go in and say, okay, let me just try to make sure I'm keeping on that 2 inches, and then you're just going to go straight around the head. So we're gonna just turn her just a little bit so you guys can see me cut this side, and we're gonna shift our camera just a little bit. There we go. Okay. So you can kind of see even in the front right here that her hair does this little motion, right? So if we're gonna connect it and we're doing a trim, we can just go ahead and connect it. She's not requesting like an extremely blunt cut or heavy layers. So we wanna go with the flow of the hair and how it's falling, but we also wanna make it look stylish and cute, right? So we're gonna just find our connector and rest right in here. And then when we snip that off, we have an even flow. So now, if you look, we have her perimeter nice and cut, right? Very healthy. Okay, so usually when I'm doing any type of trimming, I don't say I'm doing layers, okay? Because sometimes when you say layers, it scares people, but we do need to interior cut, right? Because we need to make sure that not only do we get the perimeter, we get the crown. Because lots of times you get that breakage right up in this crown area, okay? So if I'm looking at it falling, it's falling right here. Usually that piece is coming from right up in here. You see that? Okay, so what we're gonna do is, we're just gonna section this off a little bit. Okay, right? We're gonna create our first guide. And this can be cut, 45 degree, 90 degree, really any elevation. I typically like to do 90 just straight off of the head. So just straight off is where I like to cut, okay? And then that allows my dropout, which this is already trimmed, so it's gonna fall out, okay? So this portion right here, I always say any hair that you can see through should probably be removed, okay? It's kind of like another little trick when you're trimming. So I'm gonna point cut this to soften it up just a little bit and then let that drop. This way it kind of gives the illusion like you don't really have layers, but because we need to do a really good trim, we're gonna just cut in the interior of the head. And it's gonna kind of create a lot of movement once you get to the styling portion. And I actually use all of the Front Pro shears, and they are all really great. They all have their own properties, but these Invent shears are just very universal, and I have so many clients who have textured hair. It's just a lot easier for me to cut with them. So just remember to continue to follow your guide. When you get behind the ear, I like to shift this back, okay? I don't typically come on the side in here. Okay, well, I'm right above, kind of like right behind this ear point, because what that does is it kind of creates a gap and a hole when the hair falls, right? So if I turn, and remember guys, we're dealing with the circumference, so it's circular, okay? So if we come in this way, right behind the ear, and we trim this off, when this falls, you're gonna see like a hole. It's gonna be like a little gap. So what I like to do is, still following my guide, and I'll show you guys how to blend it out on one of the final steps. I just kind of take it back a little bit, okay? And then I just trim. So when this falls, you still see that shape on the perimeter, and you don't get that hole. You don't take off all of this beautiful hair that doesn't need to be trimmed off, okay? So that's kind of how you preserve the hair in this area. We all know cutting around the ear can be a little tricky. It doesn't matter what cut. It can be layers. It can be a bob. So you want to make sure we don't cut all that hair off. Do I have a question? All right. All right. Feel free to ask any questions. Okay. So let's go ahead and handle the other side. Again, we're just going to pull it out. Straight from the head, about a 90 degree. We're gonna point cut for blending purposes. Okay, we're gonna just continue on to this side. Just turn her just a little bit so you guys can see this. And I am using all From Pro products. Okay, let's just trim this in here. We're going to continue to point cut. Right. And your guide, the amount of guide that you pick up, it really is going to be determined upon whether the hair, how dense the hair is. So whether it's curly or straight, that kind of determines how much hair you're going to cut in each section and how much you're going to pick up. She probably has about a medium density, so cutting through her hair is fairly simplistic. But some people who have extremely thick hair, extremely curly hair, you might want to soften up your sections by making them a lot smaller. Okay, you can see this little bit that needs to come off. All right. Do I prefer dry over wet? I struggle with dry because personally, I do prefer dry over wet because I feel like as an artist, right, we're visual. All artists are visual, okay? Even if they say they're not. Most artists are visual. So with that being said, when I have my clients and they have really curly hair and I can't see, from a professional standpoint, if you know that the style that they want is not going to be curly, you can go ahead and blow them out straight. Don't be scared of dry cutting. Dry cutting is your best friend sometimes. I like to dry cut because I can just see. I can see exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly where I'm cutting. You know, even an artist being in the industry for so many years, you still can get, you know, a little sideways and struggle a little bit, to be honest, if you can't see what you're doing. You always want your client to be happy, and you always want to cut to be precise. For those who always cut curly, that's great. I mean, more kudos to you. I do cut curly, but I do prefer dry. Also, when you're dealing with curly hair, you know, when it's straightened, you really know exactly how much you're cutting. Sometimes you can miss and say, oh, I only cut 2 inches, but by the time you stretch that curl out, it might be 3 inches, right? So if you're blowing it out and it's straightened, you know exactly how many inches you're trimming off, okay? But if they want to stop, they want to leave with, you know, some curls, they want you to diffuse it, just always apply as much tension as possible. So when it's curly, just pull it, as much tension from the scalp as possible, and then make sure you trim. That way you'll know it'll be a lot more precise when you're cutting curly, and you'll really be able to see exactly what you're cutting, right? It's kind of like that thing when you're cutting and when you're blowing out, tension is kind of like your best friend, right? So when we do the sides, I'll come on the other side so you guys can see this part. So what I like to do whenever I get to the front and I'm trimming, especially when the hair is curly, because we're cutting for curly and straight, okay? I like to hit from the crown point, that where I originally parted at, and I like to come down. And in this case, I'm gonna drop right under her parietal, okay? Right under her parietal. It's like a little parietal, a little divot, and then it comes out, and I'm gonna come right below that, right? So this is my part. So what I'm gonna do is, so in this case, my guide becomes the crown point, right? So we're gonna pull a little piece out, okay? We're gonna let this fall out because this is all trimmed. This is all good, okay? And if you guys can see, I'll show you. Pulling this out, 90 degrees. You'll see your guide right in here, okay? And what I like to do is come in and cut at an angle. So if you want to tilt your hands up, you can do that, and then you just want to trim this off, right? So that way when it falls, again, we still have our structure on the bottom, but we're just getting the interior portion of the hair to make sure that is trimmed as well, okay? Trimming is not just perimeter cutting. It's getting anything that, you know, needs to come off. And I've looked on social media lately and I've seen what's the difference between a trim and a haircut. Well, everyone has their own opinion, but if you want to mix the two in, this is probably the best way to do it. So I'm going to do the same for the top portion. She's already parted down the middle, okay? So this gives you kind of like a V shape. You see that? So it's like a V shape, okay? And turn the camera just a little bit so she's on there for me. Okay. So we're going to come in. Still got to give ourselves that 90 degrees. We're going to let whatever needs to come out, come out. Okay, just to keep her shape. And we're still going to come in at an angle. And we're going to trim that off, right? So we still have shape. Still have substance, and the interior is also trimmed. So it's the same thing on this side. Okay. So I'm going to drop down a little below the parietal. Okay. Just grab this. Okay, it's like a little diamond, right? And come in this way so you guys can see. You guys see how all that falls out? Take a little piece from the center point as our guide, tilt, and then you can clearly see, gonna come in at an angle and just trim that off. Okay, same for this front portion. Gonna pull it up 90 degrees. That front fell out, right? Okay, we're gonna add our guide in. Okay, our guide is here, right? And we're gonna just trim at an angle. Okay? So we still have our shape, we still have our perimeter. Hi Samantha, thank you. We still have our shape, we still have our perimeter, right? And we've trimmed the interior. Another cool way you can do the interior before I get to the front portion of the face framing portion. So because this is, her head is circular, right? So we can go in with a mini circle at the top. And again, our focus is to make sure we're trimming all aspects of the hair, okay? Not just the perimeter. A trim is not just a perimeter cut. Okay. So we're gonna create this little circle. All right, so I'm gonna show you guys. So we're gonna create this nice little circle on her crown. All right. Guys, see that? So this will blend out. Remember when we dropped out her sides? This is her ear. Remember we dropped out her sides? This is a way to blend the front to the back without causing any holes in the hair. So we're gonna just pull this up, okay? And you can already see that it's trimmed at an angle, right? So we're gonna go and we're gonna just point cut. And now you're for sure certain that the sides and the back are gonna be blended out. It's kind of like cross-checking. And in some cases, you may notice maybe the side piece is a little longer than the rest of the hair. And then in that case, you would just, again, point cut it. You can go in and blunt cut it, that's no problem. But you just wanna make sure all of the hair is evenly blended out when you're doing a trim slash haircut, right? So let's get to the front of the hair. So normally, if a client asks you for a trim, they may not say they want face framing, right? But the front of the hair is where most people pay the most attention, okay? And what happens is, what we like to do is we like to press this part a little more, you know, curl it a little more, and then you get, you know, some semi breakage in the front. So what I like to do is, again, with a natural fall, just kind of see where, and maybe a towel. You guys, Front Pro has these very pretty towels. Maybe you guys can kind of see this if I do that like that. There we go. Okay. So you can kind of see where her hair needs to be connected, okay? So in this case, if it needs to be connected, we can go ahead and just face frame our client, our model. We can go ahead and face frame, because regardless, it's going to turn out to look like a face frame. So we can just go ahead and make it a face framing haircut, right? So like, we're going to take some more diamonds, right? Okay. And let's make these a little bit smaller. And again, depending on the density, sometimes you have to make this portion a tad bit smaller. Okay, we'll just pull that down. And where we can kind of see the split, if you can see it kind of goes at like a little angle, we can just make that nice and even, okay? Okay, so then we'll use this as our guide, right? So this is our guide to connect to this point of her hair right here, right? So then, with this piece, I'm actually gonna grab, and I'm gonna keep my diamond going. And I'm not gonna do a natural fall on this portion, because the way it's falling is uneven on the shoulder. And we're just gonna trim up into that guide. Okay? You don't wanna go past the ear, right? Just gonna trim up. We do the same thing on the other side. I'm just gonna turn. Let's do it like this. So you guys can see. Okay. Still zero elevation. We're just gonna hold it. You can see the piece that I cut. You just wanna find a connecting point, okay? And that's going to give us that connecting point. Okay, same thing. So now we've trimmed her hair, and we also have slight face framing, okay? So it's even all the way around. And this cut is still, when she wears her hair curly, this cut is still gonna look really, really, really nice. She's gonna have a shape, right? She's gonna have shape with her curls. She's gonna have bounce at the bottom. It's gonna be nice and even. We did some interior cutting. Definitely a go-to haircut or a trim for my girls who are naturally curly, you know, have really textured hair, and it works well if it's straight. And it works well if it's curl. So we're just gonna go in. I'm gonna put a few waves in. Do you have any questions? If you do cut wet, another good trick is, when you're cutting wet, make sure the hair is nice and wet. Don't let it dry, okay? Make sure the curls are nice and wet and everything is balanced. Sometimes you have to take a water bottle and just mist the hair so that everything is evenly wet, and then you can go in and cut the hair while it's wet. It's kind of like if you wait for one section is wet, one section is dry. Sometimes that can throw your haircut or even your trim off, and it can cause it to be just a little uneven when the person does decide to straighten their hair. Okay. Hi, Kelly. Well, actually, Kelly, I work at my salon. It's called Salon Her Inc. in Orlando, Florida. And guys, these Front Pro shears are excellent. They work very, very well with my clients. I get the very precise cuts. Again, a lot of my clients have, very textured hair, so they work well with that. They work well if it's curly, straight, wet, dry. I pretty much use all of their shears. Just a really good brand if you're thinking about, sticking to doing haircuts, which most clients get haircuts. So it's definitely something you want to make sure you learn. Remember, guys, my client, or my model client, client too. My model is naturally curly, so we just went in and we went on and just straightened her hair out so you guys could see this cut. And again, I like to dry cut. That's my thing. I dry cut a lot. I prefer it over wet cutting. Even if I have to blow the client out, I just prefer dry cutting. Love your cuts. Thank you. So just gonna do some big waves. And waves are in. Just gonna keep this nice and stylish. And quick. And really and truthfully, you guys give your clients a nice haircut. I mean, it will really and truthfully transform their hair, and that's what they're coming to you for, a transformation. So give it your all. Make sure you guys take great education, use great products. Again, I'm with From Pro, and I love their shears. You always want to keep yourself up to date on your education. Like, this haircut completely transforms her hair. It's beautiful. It looks stylish, and when she wears it curly, it's gonna be nice and full. Nicked myself. Okay. Just take this From Pro brush, just tilt your head down, my signature tilt down. We're just going to brush some of these waves out. Very pretty, guys. You see that? Very nice, very stylish, very in. Go ahead and turn the camera. All right, see that? Nice and bouncy and loose. Let's just turn her all the way around so you guys can see. Cut. Very pretty. Although it was a trim, it's still stylish, right? Hair is nice and bouncy.